from across the ecosystem, those as required. So today I'm delighted that Nadia has agreed to join us from Phoenix Labs to talk about the work they're doing with Spark. And it's exactly the subject we want to look at, the agents, right? The sort of, especially the Genesis agents and what's happening there. Yeah, and please, for the deep dives, again, give us feedback. It just helps us plan future sessions, especially if we know where the interest is. What do people want to actually delve into the detail for? And we can ensure we're structured accordingly. So, new section, I'm going to jump straight in. Weekly highlights. The idea is to bring things to the community that either from the forum, from Twitter, even just from the wider landscape that we think is of interest to our ecosystem. And from this week, I chose 5. So the first is from the team at BA Analytica and product updates. I was talking about dashboards and how much there is out there, but some really good information just on updates they're making across various dashboards to various sections, and very useful for those who are actually looking for detailed information, to know where to go to get that. The dashboards really are sort of real-time snapshots, so they should be taken, considered accordingly. And of course, they're constantly evolving, especially as our ecosystem changes. So the more feedback I think the team gets, the more they can respond and actually ensure that the dashboard's actually providing the information that the community really wants to see. Continuing on the theme of transparency, from the team at Steakhouse, there was the Q2 protocol economics released, links on the forum. I know there's been a lot of discussion in terms of discrepancies between the information there and perhaps what's being seen on dashboards. And this was discussed briefly last week. I really think it's sort of, they serve different purposes. It's not comparing apples with apples. What the team at Steakhouse are building is an actuals, almost accounts report, very similar to sort of the quarterly company accounts, where they have the opportunity to reconcile the numbers, to ensure expenses, for example, are categorized properly, and where you can actually dig in and do comparisons quarter on quarter, year on year. So 2 different lenses, but again, both showing the sort of transparency that can be found in the ecosystem when it comes to looking at fundamentals or any sort of data. The third theme I wanted to touch on quickly was something I thought quite interesting to see Spark Lend increase the target SPUSDT allocation, looking to make themselves more competitive in what is a very large market for USDT borrowing. And I thought that was really interesting because those who have been around for a long time just know how embedded USDC has been within our ecosystem. But there was always a lot of talk about USDT, but never really did we see any sort of concrete progress. So I'm actually quite excited to see this USDT, dare I call it, an integration, and see what further coupling that could lead to for the ecosystem. Clearly the biggest stable out there. It's something, it's great to just have that interaction with that market or with that community. The fourth highlight, all over Twitter, and actually the press picked this one up a lot, is the Sky buyback, especially how much has been done to date, and also specifically for August. I guess my understanding is it is a buyback and not a burn, but even so, a lot of interest there, and the whole tokenomics of the ecosystem is probably something that merits its own deep dive just by itself. A lot happening between, especially as things get restructured with foundations, core, and agents coming online. So yeah, maybe something that if there's interest, we can certainly try to plan for. And the last update, which I thought was of interest, is the SP Beam update. So like any good sophisticated and advanced ecosystem, we have a whole load of acronyms. Kudos to anyone who can actually, without looking up, write down what SP Beam stands for, but a very important governance mechanism for helping to set the stability of the entire ecosystem. And some of the recent proposals include stability fee increases across the board, which, well done, Adam, yeah, which all other things being equal will lead to an increase in profits. And you can see a whole load of detail in just how sort of parameterized the entire system has become as governance uses these mechanisms to manage stability and risk across the ecosystem. So those are the big highlights. I do also, as mentioned, want to spend some time just going through some of the dashboards we have in the ecosystem. And I'm going to jump straight in, and hopefully you see this as my screen changes. But as I mentioned, there's a lot out there. And the idea is not to do a deep dive in this session. It really is just to sort of start using them. And as we go through more calls, continue to using them and explore, different aspects of the different dashboards out there. But perhaps the first one to start with is info.sky. Really is sort of the go-to place for any metrics on Sky ecosystem. And the one, I guess, that I always have a close eye on are what I think are the fundamentals of the project. And I think something that would be very important for anyone who's actually just trying to get an understanding of the ecosystem, what's sort of powering it from a financial perspective. I'm always careful with this one because I don't think it should be construed as an account dashboard. I really sort of almost think of it as a snapshot of the sort of the financial health of the ecosystem. And obviously a lot of this data comes from, it's real time, it's on chain. So the devil is in the detail that's behind the numbers. But always, worth keeping an eye on. So I know there's been a lot of discussion around trying to understand what's behind these numbers. I think it's less, and clearly they're just so prime, income, expenses, profit. I don't think there's much doubt around the income. Clearly, that's very well captured. It sort of depends on, can be proportional to supply. Mostly, obviously, it changes based on how the allocation of our portfolio is between crypto loans, stables, the different agents out there. But I know there has been a lot of questions and doubts around expenses. And I know there's a lot of work also happening that's incorporating a lot of that feedback as we go forward. So savings rate expense, which is the big one and probably the easiest to understand. It's the SSR on all the SUSDC out there and also the DSR on all the SDI out there. I think it's actually understated because it doesn't incorporate the integration boost mechanism, which is one of the prime primitives of the ecosystem that's captured under expenses. So a lot happening here. And the reason that I go here is not to sort of dive into even whether these numbers are good or bad. It's more just to sort of set a bit of a benchmark now to ensure we keep looking at this in future sessions and tying community initiatives to see if they're really having the expected impact. So something that was just announced was those SP Beam updates. It'll be interesting to see over the next weeks if that really translates into the increase in profits that we're expecting. Something that's been spoken about a lot on the forum is this move to really minimize expenses as Sky ecosystem really puts a lot of the operational complexity into the agents. And I think the proof in the pudding is going to be as we accompany these moving forward. So this is the go-to one for Sky ecosystem. The other one I really wanted to call out is, of course, the agents, and they all have their own analytics. I'll probably come to that question later, Chris. So the agents are also building out their own analytics. A lot of dashboards out there. The one I want to call out for Spark, which is the first one to really go live, it's the Spark Data Hub. A lot of content here across, Spark liquidity layer, the token offering, even what they're doing in Lane. But again, I was quite happy, and I know this is a new feature that the team at BA Analytica just announced, to see what I consider to be sort of the real fundamentals. So how much is allocated, what APY is being earned on that, what's the base rate, what's the cost of capital, what's the spread being earned, and sort of then using that to predict, to take a stab at the forecast moving forward. So I'm seeing a question to say, how accurate are the revenue tabs? My views from a forecasting snapshot perspective. So if you took the current state of the platform and you annualize that over a 12-month period, these numbers are all coming from on-chain. So they're very accurate from that perspective. Of course, it's a very dynamic environment, as APYs in DeFi can change block by block, as can allocations. So, these numbers move up and down. As I mentioned before, these are not actuals. If you're looking for actuals, something like the Stakehouse report is a far better fit, because that will actually look back over the quarter. It will look at the actual revenue that was recorded. It will look at actual expenses that were incurred. It will ensure they're properly categorized, and it will give you an actual profit, a real sort of actual profit. I always almost distinguish these as the dashboards, a sort of forecasts, or they're sort of health checks as opposed to actuals. So yeah, but perhaps there's somebody on the call who can discuss, or who can talk more to that. So this is the one for Spark Lend, and the final one, which is the one we always, we tend to go through, is the actual market analysis on the demand side. So not much to actually talk about here this week. It's after many weeks of growth, we've seen this market actually come down a little this week. A lot of that has been driven by what looks like outflows from the Aave USDT market, and I'm not sure what's driving that, but we've sort of seen that been growing tremendously throughout the year. So a correction taking place there. In the yield markets, you're seeing a convergence of rates, certainly with Syrup USDC coming closer to the SOFR. Athena is still actually, the SUSDE rate, it seems a little overstated to me here, but they work on a sort of a trailing weekly basis. So I got a feeling that's going to, we're going to see that coming in line with the market as sort of those numbers work their way through that trailing methodology that they have. But something we'll see next week. Specifically for USDS, it's been a relatively flat week for supply. We've seen a slight increase in the amount in savings that's been offset by the amount in token rewards. The savings increase has been driven principally by Spark SUSDC offering, so one of the products built on top of SUSDS, and also the long end tail of other holders. So, these are small wallet holders who we're not able to categorize, we're not able to name. So driving growth on the supply for SUSDS, these two. With token rewards, where we've seen a slight decline, that decline's actually been driven by the Spark farm, which has seen huge growth over the last months. And that's been offset by a resurgence with the Sky farm. So it seems like renewed interest in farming the Sky token, a slight decrease with the Spark token. Bear in mind the different scales here. The Spark farm is, in the 1.3 billion, whereas the Sky farm has funds of 268 million. And those are, not much else to call out there. So those are the major dashboards I wanted to highlight. And as expected, this would take about 20 minutes, and it's taken just that. But maybe before moving on, I'll just pause, see if I can help with any of these questions. If not, these are things that maybe we take back in, and in future sessions pull in the correct, I guess, financial experts to help bring clarity. I'm not sure what step 1 to 4 expense thing refers to, Chris. So apologies there. Are they marketing figures? I don't think they're marketing. I think I would almost separate it as it's forecast, all things being equal. And of course, everything's dynamic, and so it's a fluctuating forecast. The actual is based on sort of, in a perfect market, the forecast would equal the actuals, but of course we know the markets are too dynamic for that to happen. I don't know about the actual Steakhouse numbers. I think it'd be really interesting to actually have them come in, maybe do something equivalent to a quarterly review of the numbers, because I know there is a lot of questions which I think we could really sort of get to the bottom of in this type of session. So that's something that maybe makes sense to consider, and sort of have the real experts be able to talk to the numbers, and exactly what's behind them. I'm always a little wary of numbers, just because, as we've seen, there's like a lot depends on how you're classifying things. There are lots of accounting conventions that need to be taken into account. Okay, thank you, Elia, for helping to respond there. Okay, I'm going to move on. So the deep dive we wanted to do today was on the agents, specifically the Genesis agents. And I'm going to apologize to all those who know the ecosystem very well, and many out there far better than me. But I've also seen a lot of requests from people who don't know the ecosystem that well, asking, can you help us understand, what's going on with these agents from a high level view? Some comments, how can I explain it to my mother? How can I explain it to a 5-year-old? I don't think this is going to do that. I sort of consider this as perhaps an explanation for a colleague working in financial markets who's perhaps not, a DeFi degen. So these agents, what I've really tried to focus in on is take a step back and, what are they doing? How do they earn money? And I'll do this quickly whilst we await Nadia to join us, and then can get into some real nitty gritty for the agents. But it's really twofold. The first one is the agents are able to access liquidity from the large capital base at Sky, use all their know-how in their specialist markets, whether that's in TradFi, CFI, or DeFi, and allocate that to yield opportunities. We've seen just how Spark are doing that with the SLL, and the revenue for the agent comes from the spread that they're able to earn over the base rate. The revenue for Sky Core is the base rate there. The second area of focus for the agents, it's all about driving demand for USDS. And they do this in various ways. And what I think has been interesting to watch is sort of it's just how this is innovating, and we're seeing new models and new approaches for driving USDS demand. So the easy ones that we sort of all knew, I think, when this model was envisaged, was the simple fact of running a USDS front end, something like SparkFi, something that offers access to the ecosystem, allows you to invest in a savings product, allows you to invest in the core features of USDS, such as token rewards. And in return for providing that distribution, the agent is incentivized by the accessibility rewards mechanism. And we've had some discussions on this in the past, and I certainly think it merits its own weekly deep dive, just because of how powerful a primitive this is, and actually how much of a revenue lever it is for agents. But the easy one is they sort of tag transactions that come from their front end, they tag it on chain, that gets captured, and there's a lot of dashboards, all transparent, that can show you all this on-chain data, and in turn make the calculations to incentivize the agent. The more demand they're able to drive, the more feeds back into Sky Core in terms of collateral reserves. The second use case, in terms of driving demand that we've seen with agents, is they know their ecosystems better than anyone else, and they have the business relationships, they have the know-how to structure partnerships to further distribute USDS. So we've seen third-party platforms, CowSwap, Yearn are just two that I sort of mentioned, but there's a whole host that agents are able to sign on or to register for accessibility rewards. And what the agent does is it manages that relationship. Clearly, it's a third-party integration platform, but the agent and the integrator will then share the accessibility rewards. So again, another incentive for the agent to just leverage their relationship networks to further distribute USDS within their ecosystems. And the third one, which I found has actually been really interesting to watch, and I think it's sort of something that's, over time, Spark have trailblazed a path in terms of just seeing how do they best drive USDS demand. It's what I'd almost call sort of product structuring. So whether they're building products on top of USDS, such as what they did with SUSDC, which is also all tracked on-chain and incentivized by the accessibility rewards mechanism, whether they're structuring new USDS pools, such as we saw with Pendle, where there was a USDS points Pendle pool that very quickly scaled to 500 million, or whether they're creating innovative derivatives. And again, we sort of saw the derivative from Pendle being used as collateral on a Morpho pool. The point is, as they disseminate USDS within the wider ecosystem, that'll benefit Sky Core in terms of collateral reserves, and it's all captured and incentivized for the agent. So the two big sort of yield revenue driving focus areas for the agents, allocations, and it's driving USDS demand. So apologies, I took a huge step back and I greatly simplified a very complex, very sophisticated ecosystem to go there. Of course, the benefit of all this is the simplification that you see playing out now at Sky Core. As Sky Core outsources all of this operational complexity to the agents, you start to see how it becomes more of an infrastructure service, and you start to see how it can actually very easily reduce the core, the cost base. And I know the target has been to go to zero. I don't know if that's actually practical, but that's something we'll be, watching. Clearly, that's all overseen by a very sophisticated Sky governance system. And another topic worthy of a deep dive, the agents have their own governance system, and that's something perhaps Nadia will talk to in terms of how they're viewing that from Spark. just to sort of set the context, I thought this would be helpful. So, and one thing I would just point out, this is a pure piece of work from Viridian. This is our interpretation of how things work based on the information and know-how and knowledge that we have. But I hope that's useful. So going into the agents, and before I ask Nadia to join the stage, obviously Spark, we all know about. Grove is the second one that's recently been launched. It is, at the moment, focused on RWA allocations. They're really looking to position themselves to solve for the cost of liquidity in DeFi. And as we saw in the previous graph, they do that by leveraging the scale of capital that exists at Sky. They have all the know-how, all the contacts to sit at the intersection of TradFi and DeFi. And we've seen one really interesting allocation to a collateral type that is completely new for the ecosystem, and it brings us a more diverse portfolio to tap into based on the market conditions. And I think that's actually, that's great for the ecosystem. At times, you're going to really want to tap into these type of over-allocate to this type of RWA yield opportunities, and others, it's more within the DeFi section. So, but hopefully we can get the team at Grove to come in and do a deep dive with us and go into this in much more detail. So right now, I hope we have Nadia from Spark. There's very little to say about them as an intro. They're absolutely trailblazing the path for agents. You've all seen what they've done with SparkFi, with SparkLane, the Spark liquidity layer. Spark token has been launched, and which all sort of and was hugely responsible for driving even further USD demand through the token rewards offering. But I'm going to stop there and try to come to the screen here where welcome Nadia.
Thank you, Rajiv. Hello, everyone. So, yeah, I wanted to talk today about Spark governance because that was our latest launch, and I think that from the outside it looks like something very basic, but it has taken us and the Spark Foundation a lot of time and effort to try to come up with the best governance process for Spark. We have received, of course, like a lot of support from Sky, and we also have learned a lot about governance processes thanks to Maker. So we are trying to implement best practices and all the learnings into the Spark governance process. I guess what we want to our main objective here is to maintain the velocity that Spark has, because for us in Spark in general and in Phoenix in particular, that is one of the greatest attributes of Spark, and we want to maintain that. But of course, we also want to respect transparency and decentralization of the protocol, because that is part of what Spark is. So we have been keeping that in mind to work on this new framework for Spark and its governance. I don't know if you are aware, but we have been working with the Sky governance process because we needed some time to bootstrap the Spark governance process. I think this is one of the challenges that a project has when you do a fair launch. Like if you, I don't know if you all are aware, but there were not investors besides the Sky in the Spark token. So it was a fair launch in the sense that we don't know who are the SPK token holders, which I think it is very interesting, but at the same time, it is challenging when you want to bootstrap a governance process because you don't have a way to like reach out to these token holders and like you don't know if they are willing to participate in the governance proposals and processes and vote. So what we decided, and we have been, as I explained, we have been working with the Spark Foundation on this as like the representative of the Spark community, is in a process that includes delegates. Delegates were included, I think, a month ago in one of the Atlas edits, in the artifact edits. And there are two delegates that are whitelisted by Spark, and they were appointed by the Spark Foundation. As like a big difference between Spark and Sky governance is that Spark governance is using a snapshot. So in snapshot, the polls will happen. Like right now, everything is happening in the Sky governance polls and executive votes. Big like change that you will see in a month is that the Spark governance processes will pass through a poll that will happen in Snapshot and will be voted by SPK token holders directly or through the delegates. And then if the proposal needs an executive vote, it will go through the Sky executive vote process. So this is, I think, very interesting because it is the first time we are seeing in action the idea about agents or stars having independence and being more like, independent entities that can decide by themselves and can transform everything they do without needing Sky's approval. So, of course, because of the security we need, it is also important that all executives that requires the spell to pass have to be approved and pass through the Sky executive process. So I have to say that this was like a very interesting process, especially because, well, we didn't know if people were willing to delegate. We didn't know, like, we all know that like a lot of people that received the airdrop were just thinking about selling the airdrop. Like that is what usually happens. So we didn't know if like token holders were willing to stake and delegate or just delegate. And it has been like a quite interesting surprise. Right now, there are about 170 million SPK tokens delegated, and which is like even more interesting is that the tokens are almost equally distributed between the two delegates. One of the delegates have 50% of the tokens, and the other one 49%, which is pretty good. So it's very healthy for governance. So we think that this creates a good starting point to continue to implement the other parts of the governance process that we want the Spark to have. So you will see in the following weeks new edits that will finalize everything that Spark needs to start using the Spark governance. So yeah, like we Sky gave Spark 3 months after the token launch to keep using the Sky governance process. Those 3 months finalized by the end of this month. So I believe that by the end of this month, Spark will start to use its own governance process. I don't know if anyone has any questions. If someone can help me with the questions here in the chat. Okay.
I think the one question that seems relevant to delegation, Nadia, is about the background of the delegates. I don't know if, assuming this is Remy and NeoNode as the only choices to delegate at the moment.
Yes, of course. That is something, again, like we are working on improvements of all of this, and we understand that it's important to add all these details to the delegates. But one thing that we want to continue doing, and is something that we think Sky is doing very well, is to have this anonymity on the delegates, because we don't want delegates to launch a political platform in Spark. We prefer people to delegate based on how delegates think about the project. So something we will ask, uh, something we want to do is to include somewhere a description on like how each one of the delegates think about the growth of Spark, what are like their priorities for Spark, and things that help token holders to decide on who they should delegate. So this is something it's on the roadmap, and we will implement very soon.
Yeah, it looks like horse shaped SMYL, interesting name, is in agreement with that concept. So agreed on anonymity. I think it's important to know what they think about the project. And I think that's exactly what you're looking to address.
Yeah,
And
I'm reading this comment. Is very, very funny. That Spark is made by Phoenix Labs, and Phoenix Labs is one person named Sam McPherson. Man, like that will be super incredible, because I think Spark, uh, like look at the TVL and the products and all the things that it has delivered, and it would be crazy to have just one person doing all of that. So behind the Spark is not just one company. It's not just Phoenix Labs. Phoenix Labs is the boots. I think the Atlas has a name for these companies, but it's like the company that is bootstrapping Spark. But Phoenix Labs is not the only company working for Spark. Like there are like um, various service providers working for Spark, because yeah, it is a lot. Like right now, Spark is offering two that are focused on retail: Spark Savings and Spark Lend, and one product that is focused on institutions, which is a Spark Liquid Layer, and that requires a lot of work.
it seems like there's been quite a few questions just in terms of organization charts, how many people are involved. I certainly can't answer that. Perhaps the Sky moderators could take that back in. And Nadia, in terms of sort of other priorities, sort of what are the main areas of focus at the moment in terms of the agent beyond governance? Is that something you're able to talk to?
Yes, of course. Before answering that question, I want to answer the question from Stable FOMO. Like Spark spells will need to be activated by Sky. The answer is yes, and that is a security measure we have in the Sky ecosystem. So, an example of how this is going to work is, let's say Spark Liquid Layer wants to allocate to, I don't know, and like, I don't know, like a new pendle pool. And to do that, in order to do that, Phoenix Labs or someone else um, who has enough voting power to present a proposal can present a proposal in the forum detailing all the risk analysis to include this new integration in the Spark Liquid layer. So as for now, the governance process in Sky is not ready. So what is happening right now, it is like the poll happens on the Sky side, but once the Spark governance process is ready, the poll will happen on Spark. So Spark token holders will decide if they want to approve or reject that integration. If that integration is approved, then the Spark spell goes to the Sky executive vote, and it will like continue like the regular process of a executive vote. And regarding roadmap, yes, actually we have, after the token launch, we have been working a lot on different things for Spark. A lot of them are confidential because, yeah, like they're very special, and we don't want to reveal anything until it's ready. But to give you an idea, we are very focused on improving the way how savings work. So we want to bring more improvements to the savings product. Recently, we just included a new stablecoin to the Spark Liquid layer and Sparkland, and we want to keep doing that. We want like to have more stablecoins inside the Spark assets. We are also very focused on providing services to crypto institutions. We realize that like users that currently are using Spark through Sparkland or integrations with the Spark Liquid layer are crypto institutions. So we are working on improvements on how we can serve to these users. So yeah, I think all of these new things that we want to launch will happen in the next quarter. So yeah, you will see them once we are ready to talk more in detail about them. We will come back here to present the things that we want to launch.
Thanks so much, Nadia. There's some more questions for you. I don't know if you're in a position to talk to them, but any buyback plans for Spark from Sam Pump?
Well, all I have to say about that is we need the Spark governance process in place to do things like that. So if everyone here sees that things are not moving, is because our priority, the Spark's priority right now, is to have the governance process in place. Any change that anyone in the ecosystem wants to propose, and if you want something to happen inside Spark, in order to do that, we need the governance process in place. So that is why it is right now one of our highest priorities, and it will be ready by the end of the month. So yeah, just like please delegate. If you're a token holder, delegate, because that is what we need to launch the governance process. We want like a healthy governance process to start sending proposals to governance.
I think there's a follow-up question there.
Yeah, to become a Spark delegate, like right now, because we are on the bootstrap phase, to become a Spark delegate, you have to go through the Spark Foundation. It's not Sky is not involved in this. So once Spark governance is more mature, all of this will be done on chain and through a decentralized vote. But because right now everything is too new, we need the Spark Foundation helping Spark with that. Spark Foundation is appointing the current delegates, but the edits of that, the edits to the artifact has to be approved, were approved by Sky Governance. So to answer your question, Spark Foundation is appointing the delegates and the Sky Governance is approving them. This is because right now Spark doesn't have a governance process, so Spark has to use the Sky governance process.
Perhaps as you keep an eye on the chat, Nadia, to see if there are any other questions, but much appreciated you joining us and providing your insight and the transparency. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajiv, for inviting us.
I think that might be a wrap. So thank you, everyone. And again, I'd sort of just reiterate, we're really looking to make these calls community driven. We need your inputs to sort of help us understand where the doubts, where the focus areas, and we will look to incorporate those into future sessions. I see people are still typing, so I'm going to let it go on. I'm assuming the question's for you, Nadia, but it changes. Again, please keep the feedback coming. We have the Sky moderators with us, so even if we can't get to it now, it's all just very useful insight to take back into the ecosystem.
Just like to answer Sam Pump question. I suppose you are more worried about how, like, about the expenses of Spark. So we're working on that. We want to launch a transparency dashboard where everyone can get to see revenue, profits, expenses of Spark in general. We want to launch that also very, very soon. We know that is very important for token holders. So that is something we want to do as soon as possible. In regards like how big the workforce is, so currently for Spark, we have entities, companies working for Spark. So I have no idea how how many people work for each one of these companies, but Spark Foundation is working with, I have to ask them, but I guess that the minimum of like 10 different companies to for all the things that Spark needs. If that is important, like I don't know if that is the thing that you want to know, like how many companies work for Spark Foundation. That is something that I can ask the foundation. But if what is important is like the expenses, revenue, and profits, we will have a dashboard that will have all that information in place. Yeah, correct. Around 9 million per year.
Okay, I think perhaps we wrap it there. Chris, sorry, I don't know how, I don't have visibility to your question. I'm not sure if anyone on the call does. But again, thank you everyone for your participation in this new format. We welcome any feedback as we iterate these moving forward. Have a good day.